Here we will be talking about loops in PowerShell. So loops are a programming structure that allows you to run code multiple times without needing to write it over and over again. So there are a few types of loops, at least 4. So the for loop, the for each loop, the while loop, and the do while loop are the ones we're going to cover in this video. So the first one we're going to cover is the for loop. So take a look at this example right here. So as you can see here, we're trying to write all the numbers from 1 to 10, and we wrote it 10 times, which is not the most efficient way of doing it, especially if you have to do more than 10, like let's say a billion. That's not the most efficient way of handling this. So let's look at the for loop for this. So the for loop has 4 parts. The first one is the initiation phase. So in this part, you initialize a variable, and here it's I, and a lot of time it's I for iterator or index or whatever, and but you can make it anything you want as long as it's a valid variable. So none of the protected variable, automatic variables from PowerShell. So this variable here gets set to a certain value. Here it's I equals 0. Then you say, you give it the condition for which to keep doing the loop. So here for I less than, and in our case we're going to say 11. Actually, we're going to say 10, and we want it to be less than or equal to 10. And here we're going to start it with 1. And this is what action needs to be performed at the end of the loop when it is done. So here it's increasing I by 1. So this action is supposed to get us closer to the end condition for the loop. So let's take a look. So here we're going to do write host, host I. So, and in this case, we're going to be having the same result as the previous one. But as you can see, instead of having 10 lines of code, we only have 3, which is very practical. So this is the for loop for you. One other thing we can do with the for loop is iterate over an array. So if we have an array and we want to iterate over it, we can use this type of for loop. So this is our array, and each one is an index. And you know that in the indices start at 0. So the first item is 0, then 2, then 3, and 4. So what we're doing here is going from index 0 to the last index. So we know that this a.count will return 5 because there are 5 items in here. But while I is less than, strictly less than 5, it will continue. And in this case, we'll run it and we'll see that it will print each part. So there you go, printed everything. So, but that's not the most practical way of doing this. There are use cases where you would want to look at the index of an array or a string or whatever, but this is not really a use case for this. A better use case for this would be the for each loop. So in the for each loop, let's take our array again. So we have this array, and here we would do a for each loop. And the way this works, you set a variable that will contain the current item processed in the loop. So this would be equivalent, and let's just write host here. Oops. So this, let's just show you that this works. And here's the equivalent for loop. Let me actually do this. And this is A. And here we'll do item equals A, sorry, $i, right? And right host item. So these two loops are equivalent because they will both go over the array, each item in the array. But the advantage of using this is that you will be able to do it much quicker and much more cleanly. You don't have to declare that value and whatnot. So there's that. Another one is for each object. So let's say we have A here, and we can pipe it to for each object. So this is another type of loop where it will go over each object in this array. And here, that's where the $_ automatic variable comes in. So if we do right host, here we have the for each object loop that will go, this is piped over to this commandlet, and it will loop over each object. And if we run it, you'll see we'll get the same result. So these are the for each loops, the two ways of doing for each loops. They're very practical. So next, let's look at the while loop. So the while loop runs as long as a condition is true. So let's take a look at the default. So this is the structure of a while loop. It will run as long as this condition is true. Now, let's take a look at a concrete example. So I have a computer on this network that is off currently, right? So this computer is off, and I will start it now because it will take some time, and I will explain what is happening. So as you can see, I'm setting the remote computer value to the IP address of the remote computer. And while this is not true, so this test connection is a ping type of command. It's the equivalent of ping. While this is not, this computer is not connecting, we are going, in responding to pings, we are going to say could not reach host IP address with a right background, right font. And when this is done, when this condition is finally true, when this computer finally responds to the ping, then we will write that we reached the computer. We could reach the computer. So this code will hold everything else that's happening after it from happening until that condition is true, which is very practical for things like that, where you want to wait for a computer to be on before you proceed with doing things to it or whatever. Or you could do the reverse, where we can do this. So while this is true, while the computer is true, we can say could reach host, and we want to turn it off, is off. And so let's do this. We'll stop the machine, and we'll run this. Actually, I may have stopped the machine too early. There we go. We could reach host, so that's a problem. We don't want to be able to reach the host. We want it to be turned off. And so this is holding the script until the machine is off and stops responding to pings. There we go. So now the machine is off and it stopped responding to pings. So that's a very practical loop. Now let's do the do while loop. So it's the same thing as a while loop, except it's in reverse. So what do I mean by that? So what I mean by that is that the do while loop will evaluate the condition that enables it to keep running at the end, as opposed to the beginning. So let me turn the machine back on. So let's look at this code. So what we're trying to do here is somewhat similar to the previous code. So what we want to do is check if the computer was already online before we started running the code. And so what we have is we have the computer, we have tries, and here this is going to be incremented every time the loop is run. I mean, we could also do it outside, but we're going to do it this way. So this will go through one time, and then it will evaluate whether or not this condition is true. So this loop will run at least once. The previous one may not run at all. It may just evaluate the condition first, decide that it's false, and keep going. So this is the advantage of the do while loop. It will run at least once. So if you find yourself in a situation where you write a piece of code first and then right here, then write the same piece of code in a while loop, then you know that you're supposed to do a do while loop. So let's give that a shot. So the machine is on now, and we'll run it and we'll see what happens. So we're checking if the machine is on, and there we go. So now it's on. Whoops. Now it's on, and you can see that this ran once, and tries value is 1. Okay, so now we can run it again. I just turned off the machine. It's checking if it's on, and oh, it's still shutting off. While this is shutting off, let me clear this, and it's probably good enough now. There we go, it's probably good enough. So now it's turning off. So it's gonna do it over and over again, and then we'll know that the machine was off, or at least not reachable when this code started to run. And it will take a little while. There we go. So, and let me start the machine back up. So this is the advantage of a do while loop, is you can run at least once. All right, so there it is. The machine now is, we know that the machine was off. So there you go. Those are the 4 loops. I will leave the code in the course content and the resources. So if you want to take a look at those different loops, you can take a look there. And that's it for this video.